Isn't it hard to believe that a tune this simplistic gave birth to the riffs we hear in songs like Bohemian Rhapsody? This tune that was just played for you was among the first genres to adopt the electric guitar, the instrument that went on to become synonymous with rock music. Rock music is a broad genre of music, so diverse it includes acts like Led Zeppelin and Coldplay, whose music couldn't be more different from each other's. Because of this very reason, it's difficult to come up with a concrete definition. Sure, it's often music that is song based, in a sung in a verse chorus form, incorporating electrical instruments with a strong beat. But there have been way too many exceptions to the rule for that to be the case. The genre originated in the United States in the late 1940s and early 1950s as rock and roll. It borrowed heavily from other musical styles like gospel, blues, jazz, rhythm and blues, and country music. Over the next few decades, it was popularized throughout most of the English speaking world, and by the 1990s, it was being heard globally. What started out as just Elvis Presley crooning and dancing in a jailhouse developed into a wide variety of subgenres: punk rock, glam rock, indie rock, and heavy metal, just to name a few. Rock has consistently been one of the most popular genres of music for over half a century, even though rap surpassed it as the most popular genre in the US in 2017. It still has a large and loyal fan base. Its diversity and its rich history give it a unique position among musical genres, contributing to its popularity. No matter who you are, where you come from, rock has something for you. Even though this diversity may occasionally lead to conflicts between different eras or different subgenres of rock, more often than not, these differences complement each other, influence each other, and lead to the formation of more subgenres, like jazz rock and rap rock, for new generations of music lovers to fall in love with. Rock musicians gained an almost mythic image by the 70s and the 80s, around the same time the term rock star entered popular lingo. Rock bands were selling out arenas all over the world, fans obsessed with the lifestyles dangerously. Bands like the Beatles, Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones were treated like deities. Imagine your music being so influential, everyone on the street has the same haircut and outfit as you. You're being followed everywhere you go. You get love letters written in blood. You get death threats too. At the same time, parents all over the world criticize your music and your influence on their kids and threaten legal action. All this while trying to fulfill your contracts with your record labels. A rock icon can be massively influential even after their death. For instance, Kurt Cobain's acoustic guitar, the one that you see on the screen right now, sold for 6 million US dollars, a world record for any guitar, 26 years after his death. With new styles and artists coming up all over the world, the future of rock seems as bright as ever. As long as humans have the ability to recognize rhythm, rock will continue to evolve and inspire generations. Even if robots were to take over the world, like in the Terminator movies, I'm sure even they would be metalheads. Well, till that happens, rock on.
So I'm here to talk about the chronology of music, chronology of rock, in fact, how it evolved to what we know today. Lies with the development and innovations that stemmed from the stalwarts of rock. People like Eric Clapton, people like Jimmy Page, people like Jimi Hendrix, who basically laid the foundation for what we know today in rock. Distinct sounds we hear in rock, the dirty, distorted sounds that have come to define the electric guitar, and the sound profile of this genre actually come from broken amplifiers that were appreciated by live audiences for this new growling sound that originated from the guitars. Revolution in popular music. I'm here to talk about how rock as an art form evolved stylistically had on the way we create music today, and how it's also personally influenced me, how as to how I approach music as an artist. Origins of rock in the first place, with early artists such as the Who or the Rolling Stones, they basically borrowed and added their own spice to blues licks and blues melody lines of the electric guitar. They took these sultry melodies and turned them into punchy and dirty riffs with the sound of classic rock and roll. A great example of this would be Layla by Eric Clapton and Derek and the Dominoes, which is based on just six notes of the minor blues scale, but it has become one of the most iconic rock riffs to have graced. It draws heavily from blues inspirations from likes of Robert Johnson in the 1920s and other blues artists. When we talk about classic rock, what do we say about the stylistic aspects of the sound? All future music that we now know and hear. This usually featured a simple five-piece drum, an overdriven amplifier, accompanied by two guitarists, a rhythm guitarist and a lead guitarist, who used to accompany each other in terms of harmony, melody, and rhythm. And another revolution that came in rock music was the invention of the electric bass, which basically covered the lower ends of your music, highs, mids, and lows. The guitar usually covered the mids, the vocals usually covered the highs, essential crux of sound, which were the lows, which made music a lot more enjoyable to listen to, and also made it a lot more easier to mix, master, produce, and create. Diversification of rock to fit different audiences and sounds purely because varieties of sound could cover all the three bases in music in general. I'll be dealing with the characteristics of three major subgenres: heavy metal, grunge rock, and alternative rock, sprung into existence consecutively. Black Sabbath had some of the most iconic riffs and vocal lines in history. Ozzy Osbourne's haunting voice and Tony Iommi's dark and gloomy single note riffs laid the foundation for the very genre we know today as heavy metal. Metalhead and ask them what do they draw inspiration from, what bands do they listen to. It's very likely they'll name one of these four bands: Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, or Anthrax. The characteristics of the sounds was basically heavy downstrokes, chugging sounds that used to come from the electric guitar, double bass on the drums, extremely fast tempo songs and darkish lyrics, and extremely energizing music in general, made for just headbanging, right? This gave birth to progressive music and progressive metal that we know today by Dream Theater and associated acts. Road to further complex or to further complexity in terms of rock music. Rock music became a lot more complex with the advent of metal in general. Music theory was looked at more, and how to make ideas flesh out in the greatest sense came out in the terms of making it more complex. Branch in the 90s was the advent of grunge, characteristic fat sound that can be found in many rock bands even today. It often revolved around simple chord progressions, a heavily overdriven guitar, and short guitar solos that matched the melody and motifs in the song. A motif is a recurring theme in a song, recurring melody line or lick in the song. The reduced complexity and the everlasting rage that used to propel from these songs made them teenage anthems for all the right reasons. A FU to authority, if you will. With this would be Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains. Their main characteristic was just screaming into the mic, banging on the drums till the skin tore off, just thrashing your guitar to whatever power chords that could come in your mind, and basically just letting loose while on the stage. Came the world of alternative rock. I'm most familiar with here, I'd say. The characteristics of these bands of this genre was that music mellowed down to quite an extent to focus more on the lyrical content surrounding the daily struggles or aspects of life, as compared to the broader issues in life, showcased by a more subdued sound with respect to the instruments and mostly arpeggiated guitar rhythm pieces, right up to a very distorted build up in the chorus, right down to a mellowed down conclusion to the song as well. And the reason for this was it made genres like metal, it made genres like rock a lot more accessible to the wider populace. Purely because metal was seen as something heard by people with long hair, people with eyeliner, and people who would just headbang. But this made it a lot more accessible because everyone could sing along, everyone could have something to relate to with alternative rock. Examples of this would be like Linkin Park, Hoobastank, Creed, Limp Bizkit. The importance of what I'm talking about, the importance of understanding this evolution of rock is simply two things: structure and accessibility. Music has become a lot more structured as opposed to what it was in the 1950s, as opposed to the interactive forms of music that existed in that time, like jazz, where instrumentalists would just play off one another based on what they were playing on stage. So this meant better accessibility for more people to create music in the first place because arrangement wasn't as much of an issue as much idea generation was. Was to be more creative with the music their bedroom with the cheap guitar. The electric guitars became a lot cheaper due to rock music. People with just a guitar in the bedroom could just think of riffs, could just think of lead lines, and just become the biggest rock stars in the world. This accessibility was really important of rock music in the first place. That it's open to all, it's open to everyone. The reason why I got into rock, the reason why rock is so close to my heart is because it allowed me this unleashing of creativity in general. It allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do with my instrument in general. And that's why rock is so important.
Close your eyes. Imagine yourself back in the 1960s. Or better yet, imagine yourself, or better yet, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself in the night. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself back in the 1960s. Or better yet, imagine yourself as a black parent in the 60s working hard to pay bills. A world of music, of legends like John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and Wes Montgomery await you. If you can see what I'm trying to show, welcome to the early ages of rock. No, don't open it yet. You are still in there. You have a beautiful baby daughter you'd like to send to university and like to see as a confident individual. But the world outside is very cruel. Racism and sexism run rampant in society. And what's more, the music you liked has started changing too. At first, you don't accept the change. Later, you start kinda liking it. You feel happy that at least the world of music still remains hopeful. But you don't know what's happening in there. You hear a lot of things, but the audience about the audience taking the wrong things and considering it as a rite of passage, but you simply disregard. A lot of years pass. You are in the 70s now. Your daughter is in her teens and is working as a waitress, but you see some changes in her behavior. You can tell that she is hanging out with the wrong kind of people. One day, you go and find the place where she was working and see that she has been fired. You are shook. You decide to find out about her as much as you can. Slowly, you start to realize that she has been fired for the last few months and has been taking drugs to cope up with the stress. You still see her as a young girl, but you don't yet realize the whole truth. As you venture deeper, you find that the place where she was working as a waitress, she was in touch with a lot of rock stars. That music which you liked for its weird tunes, which you never really heard properly, and you suddenly start paying more attention to the lyrics and the personal life of the stars, and then you start to get the entire picture. These stars that they call themselves, their music and their terrible habits, and your daughter was pulled into the world of drugs by one of those monsters. These terrible things that she had taken, put in her body herself, had left her with a lot of debt, and some of them with these so called rock stars. To pay these debts back, she had started to do some bad things, things you never wanted her to do. These musicians, in their amazing motorcycle leathers, with a lot of pockets and chains and smelly t shirts and whatnot, had started to take sexual favors from your daughter in exchange of money. These demons had eaten in her college money and were now doing this. You decide to go and have the talk with your daughter, but you don't need to. As soon as you reach home, she tells you the truth. You appreciate her courage and you start thinking of a way out. These were the experiences of a lot of people in the 60s. Young people exploited by rock stars, but it wasn't bad all along. By the 70s, a new sun rose on rock, and a lot of stars were put in rehabilitation for drug abuse. Even many famous ones like John Lennon, Keith Richards, Jimmy Page, David Crosby, and many of the stars that you like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison, died due to overuse. The music itself has had gotten a lot cleaner, and many anti-drug songs like The Needle and The Damage Done by Neil Young came. Even the fashion was changing too. Glittery clothes, skinny ties, shiny shoes, and rock started reacting to the world around it. Many rock songs were getting tied to the civil rights movements. During the Vietnam War, the first rock protest songs were heard, inspired by the songs of folk musicians such as Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan, which ranged from abstract evocations of Peter, Paul, and Mary's If I Had a Hammer to blunt anti establishment protests. Other musicians, notably John Lennon and Yoko Ono, were vocal in their anti war statements, both in their music and in public. Famous rock musicians have adopted causes ranging from the environment, like Marvin Gaye's Mercy Mercy Me, and the anti apartheid movement, like Peter Gabriel's Biko, to violence in the Northern Ireland, portrayed by U2's Sunday Bloody Sunday, and worldwide economic policy, the Dead Kennedys Kill the Poor. David Bowie, Elton John, and Freddie Mercury gave hope to many and helped them understand their sexuality. Rock and roll as social activism reached a milestone in the Live Aid concert held on July 13, 1995, which were an outgrowth of the 1984 charity single Do They Know It's Christmas and became the largest musical concert in history. Today, a lot of rock stars have managed to come clean. They have managed to turn their lives around. The rock that had once destroyed many lives also had taken a complete 180-degree turn and started to become a major point in causing change. As the ill effects of the things that they used to advertise have started to spread, we see that the rock stars have started to clean up their act. We have seen them get better as a group, as public figures, and much cleaner as individuals. The old bands were in an environment which did not help them get better, but the newer bands are looking in the world with a new vision. So we sit and wonder, does it really matter whether they were good or bad before, if they are really trying to be better today than they were yesterday?
The Oxford Dictionary for the English Language defines popular culture as culture based on the tastes of ordinary people rather than an educated elite. The biggest reason why music has been able to play a definitive role in popular culture has been its ability to seep in universal emotion and personal thoughts, regardless of the boundaries posed by language or religion. Let us take a look at the world right now itself. An app like TikTok, which was almost unanimously associated with nothing but non sequitur, now has over 2 billion downloads and is competing with the biggest platforms in the world when it comes to corporate financing. But why is it so? Because music has an inherent ability to capture emotions with depth and perspective like no other art form. Everywhere you look, every single distinct culture or counterculture, especially in the Western world, attaches some form of mainstream music to its ideals in order to create a sense of validation, and that is to gain a place in pop culture itself. Whether it is the marijuana loving crowds of Amsterdam playing 70s psychedelic rock tunes by Pink Floyd, or losing themselves in the reggae sounds of Bob Marley. One could also look at the anti establishment culture that was widespread in the 80s, with young people endorsing punk rock standouts like The Clash and finding comfort in David Bowie's unique aesthetic expression, all the way down to the LGBTQ plus supporters using Freddie Mercury as an icon for their protests, even though Freddie Mercury never officially came out as a homosexual man. And this is what drives the real context of rock music. The fact of the matter is that great music stands for much more than the musician himself or herself. It stands for a grand idea which millions or even billions of people can relate to and use to process their daily ups and downs. And I guess if the Oxford Dictionary knows one thing about definitions, I'd say rock music's place in popular culture is not only out of question, but also central to our past, present, and the future. Rock and roll's skill in affecting popular culture is simply enhanced by its insane ability to absorb other genres. And when we discuss musical virtuosity in the modern age, there is one individual who is simply unmissable in our society. And his name is, you may have guessed it, Kanye West. In an interview with renowned music journalist and radio show host Zane Lowe, Kanye once said, and I quote, I am the biggest rock star in the world. This statement is simply a testament to the fact that rock doesn't simply imply guitar driven music, right? It is an idea of free, endless artistic exploration that resonates with all sorts of cultures. A rock star isn't just a rock star, he or she is the person who makes themselves heard when the light shines the brightest. You could go all the way back to the 60s, where the Beatles went from black two-piece suits to colorful marching band outfits and all the way down to long hair and clumsy looking beards. And guess what? The world followed. Now, let's just take a breezy jog to the beginning of the millennium. At the end of bubblegum pop, we had the Strokes, who wore tight fitting jeans and leather jackets. And you guessed it, popular culture followed again. Our journey down this tunnel of time brings us to present day, where popular artists not only define fashion choices, but the way we live life altogether, be it our eating habits, fitness regimes, or pretty much anything else. Everyone wants to stay in sync with their favorite artists and songwriters for the sole reason that they can. And I believe that it is these ideas and these concepts that place rock and roll at the center of cultural disposition for the world we live in.
You are what you listen to. Most of us are familiar with this adage, and it does hold true to a certain extent. The scraps of lyrics, bits of melodies, and obscure jingles that cloud our heads create a lens through which we see, hear, and interact with the world. If you pay attention, the next time you scroll through someone's Spotify playlist, you just might learn a little something about the type of person they are. Our ability to gauge whether we like or dislike a piece of music quite often extends to the people associated with it. We might immediately dismiss someone just because they have different musical tastes. I did this when someone told me their favorite artist is Skrillex. This is where music psychology comes into the picture. It aims to answer why certain music is perceived the way it is. It sheds light on human attitude, skills, and even social behavior. You must have come across some people who describe themselves as an INTJ or an ENFP. These cryptic four letters refer to the Myers Briggs personality type indicators. It includes a series of questions that determines your personality type, your strengths, and your preferences. Certain personalities are known to flock more readily towards some genres while they reject others. Intuitive and curious people tend to like rock more, whereas observers and analysts prefer classical music. This correlation between music and personalities can be well explained by another personality indicator called OCEAN or Ocean. This deals with five major personality traits, where O stands for openness to experience, C for conscientiousness, E for extraversion, A for agreeableness, and N for neuroticism. These can be applied to a large and varied demographic as they are found to be present in over 40 languages and cultures. In a study involving over 5,000 human participants, researchers unearthed the big five of musical preferences, which are known by the acronym MUSIC. Each letter stands for a particular musical preference. M stands for mellow. Soft, sad, and romantic melodies come under this category. Think Hosier or the Lumineers. U stands for unpretentiousness. Folk music and country rock come under this category. Bob Dylan is a great example. S stands for sophisticated. This is a no brainer and it includes complex instrumentals and classical pieces, or what some uncultured people know as elevator music. I stands for intense. This is characterized by distorted, loud, aggressive sounds. To those who stay away from rock, this is not what this genre is all about. However, this particular subcategory does lean towards the subgenre of punk rock and heavy metal. And finally, C, which stands for contemporary. This comprises a whole array of genres, from rap to EDM, or whatever dominates today's music charts. You should try the test online and see how your musical preferences relate to your personality and vice versa. We have an endless variety of music to choose from today, but this was not always the case. Music used to play a huge hand in shaping how people used to present themselves. It gave them a sense of identity and a feeling of belonging. So when you picture a rock fan, you might think of someone like this. Rock has always had a dicey image, which is why people used to hold prejudiced views towards rock fans. Some people believed rock to be the devil's music. They held it responsible for negative actions such as aggression or rebellion. Even studies show this is not true. In fact, listeners in the 80s and 90s who grew up listening to rock and metal primarily are relatively stable individuals who lead healthy lives today. Moreover, being a part of something that is out of the norm helped troubled youth to be more comfortable with themselves and their identities. Another popular misconception is heavy music makes people angrier and more volatile. On the contrary, research shows it helps in anger regulation. The heightened energy is in tandem with the person's psychological state. Listening to rock just might be the cheapest form of therapy available out there. So go ahead and blast AC/DC from your speakers if it makes you feel better. It is worth mentioning here that just because a particular song or a particular genre is regarded as uplifting or depressing or intense does not necessarily mean that it will alter your mood. It all depends on how you approach music and how you use it to alleviate sadness, boost happiness, or mitigate anger. Do you know who else is prejudiced towards rock music? Mice. These rodents were subjected to Mozart for extended periods of time and were made to navigate through mazes. They amble their way through without breaking a sweat. But everything changed when rock was brought into the picture. The music surged their negative emotions and predatory instincts. The mice could not handle it, and it ended in a bloodbath. Humans, luckily, are guided by an ethical system. This prevents the heightened emotions from translating into such aggressive behavior as it did with the mice. Well, at least most normal humans aren't adversely affected. They may experience severe mood swings or personality disorders, but not to such an extreme extent. Charles Manson is a radical exception to this case, the infamous cult leader who was influenced by the Beatles' Helter Skelter. When it comes to your musical taste, it is influenced by a variety of factors such as age, gender, social, and cultural backgrounds. This, along with the limitless access to music, has helped us become more tolerant and break the stereotypes that revolve around hardcore music fans. A lot of us get defensive when questioned about musical choices. I'm guilty of protecting my favorite artists and songs like it's a closely guarded secret. Nor do I give random song recommendations to friends unless I'm absolutely sure about the type of person they are and the type of music they listen to. I do believe there is a strong link between musical tastes and personality traits. So the next time you make a playlist, think about how much of your personality and attitude is reflected.
One cannot talk about rock music without talking about the bands that define this genre. So let's talk about the greatest rock bands of all time on the basis of their influence, success in sales, the quality, and the enduring legacy of their music, as well as how prolific they are. This is a band that needs no introduction. Their nickname, the Fab Four, says it all. The band liked the idea of using the name of an insect as a band name, as they were fans of Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Because John Lennon loved puns, he altered the spelling of Beatles from Beetles to Beatles, from being rejected multiple times by record labels to winning 7 Grammys to landing the number one position in the Rolling Stone magazine's 100 greatest artists of all time. The band has come a long way. The Beatles also inspired the fan phenomenon Beatlemania. As they gained a mass following in the early 60s, the Beatles opened up a world of possibilities to energize teenage fans who had the disposable cash and leisure time to follow them. 60s counterculture writers say that the Beatles were endowed with a mysterious power to create a new human species, a young race of laughing free men. Well, this doesn't seem unnatural considering that the Beatles earned $90,000 in 35 minutes for their Minneapolis show in August 1965. The Beatles sparked changes in the way the teenagers walked, talked, and dressed. The shaggy haircut, known as a mop top, suddenly became popular in the early 60s, and long hair became more socially acceptable. The band also popularized Cuban heel boots, which are now known as Beatle boots. Later, in their more psychedelic phase, they inspired imitators to grow mustaches and beards, while making less formal clothes seem acceptable in everyday life. Long before MTV, the Beatles promoted their music through feature films and television appearances. They made a lasting contribution to the world of cinema through 5 influential movies, which even made irreverence fashionable in mainstream culture. John Lennon's anti war campaigns and his Song of Peace, Imagine, still resonate five decades later. So profound was their impact that the University of Southern California has been teaching a course called The Beatles, Their Music and Their Time for more than 2 decades. At their final 1969 rooftop concert, the band left behind a legacy. The band member wore ladies' coats and wrapped their microphones in pantyhose. It was through ceaseless inventiveness that the Beatles set musical trends that are still being followed. They never rested on their achievements and constantly stretched the boundaries of music. In short, a world without the Beatles would be very different and missing part of its musical soul. Freddie Mercury suggested the name Queen, which ultimately stuck. It was one syllable, catchy and aesthetically pleasing to the ears. He thought the name was splendid. With Mercury's theatrical vocals and lively stage presence, Brian May's incredible guitar melodies, the Brits scored big on the unconventional but highly appealing Bohemian Rhapsody. Then they became radio favorites, which subsequently led them to sell out stadiums worldwide, cementing their reputation. Set up in 1973, the International Queen Fan Club is officially recognized by the Guinness World Record as being the longest running rock group fan club. To give justice to their fame in simple statements, think about it this way: Queen is one of the only groups of people, beside the Queen of England, to appear on the country's postage stamp. In 2002, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody was voted UK's favourite hit of all time in a poll carried out by the Guinness World Records. Well, Queen fans have for decades tried to decipher the underlying meaning to the lyrics of Bohemian Rhapsody. It talks about the Quran, the devil, Galileo, poverty, among many other things. Freddie Mercury, who wrote the lyrics, insisted that they are meaningless and just rhyming nonsense. By 1988, Queen fans noticed that Freddie, now 42, looked thin and ill. He denied that anything was wrong with him, but the previous year he had tested positive for HIV. The show Must Go On was written by Brian May in honor of Freddie's efforts to continue singing and contributing to the band despite his struggle with AIDS. Two of the band's original members, Brian May and Roger Taylor, continue to perform together as Queen. In 2014, they released an album called Queen Forever. In honor of Freddie Mercury, they continue to do fundraising to help fight AIDS. Queen garnered a cross generational legion of fans and also had a global lasting effect, not only in music, but in fashion, popular culture, and beyond. The band remains the most important in music history thanks to their creation of dramatic, anthemic, and inspiring songs which never get old no matter how many times you heard them. What do you get when you combine bluesy vocals, extraordinary guitar solos, thunderous bass drums, and timeless bass lines? You get an innovative, unmatched sound that blends blues, hard rock, and folk. Thanks to their incomparable live performances, willingness to experiment, and wild offstage behavior, Led Zeppelin became the biggest band of the 1970s. Throughout their lifetime, the band was associated with black magic and satanic rituals, stemming from guitarist Jimmy Page's obsession with occultist Aleister Crowley. It further alleviated when fans and musicians allege that when their hit Stairway to Heaven is played in reverse, satanic messages could be heard. But there is no story in rock and roll like the story of Led Zeppelin, rooted in a conviction that the band represented a new world, a new age, a rift between the hard fought values of the 1960s and the real life pleasures and recklessness of the 1970s. Either the band was taking us forward or taking us under, illuminating the times or darkening them. Led Zeppelin was talented, complex, grasping, beautiful, and dangerous, which made them one of the most enduring bodies of composition and performance in 20th century music, despite everything they had to overpower. They pushed their limits, challenged ideals, and pulled out all the stops when it came to making music. Led Zeppelin was steeped in American blues, but they took that influence in a heavier direction than most of their peers, creating sound that also incorporated elements of British folk, psychedelia, soul, reggae, Celtic, and Arabic music. With their introspective lyrics, studio experimentation, and effects heavy extravagant shows, Pink Floyd influenced countless later acts. Early on in their career, before they even had the budget to back up their ambitions, Pink Floyd would create visuals for their live shows using a number of cheap yet effective ways. One of these ways was to cover their lights with colored condoms. In 1967, Pink Floyd was stationed at Abbey Road to record their first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. While they were doing this, the Beatles were in the building adjacent to them recording Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Safe to say, that was a great year for music. In 1989, Russian cosmonauts even took an album by Pink Floyd with them to the Mir space station. It became the first rock album to be ever played in space. In 2015, a new species of damselfly was discovered in Africa. The scientists who discovered it ended up naming the new species Umaguma after Pink Floyd's 1969 album Umaguma. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame cites Pink Floyd as the architects of two major music movements, psychedelic space rock and blues based progressive rock. They were also famed for their biting political, social, and emotional commentary and used their platform to compose music talking about corruption, greed, and capitalism. They were known for their 20-minute opuses and grandiose stadium shows featuring flying pigs to symbolize protest, dystopia, and even violence. In Buddhism, nirvana means ultimate freedom and individuality. And that's exactly how Kurt Cobain, the guitarist of Nirvana, felt about punk rock and grunge. Nirvana came up at a time when rock music gained so much popularity that many were trying to be better. Artists began to play faster, but not better. Rock music began to lose all of its charm and intensity. It turned into a mainstream genre and consisted of members trying to play faster than anyone else. It consisted of guitarists who played with thrills, tricks, and crazy techniques, but lost all of its soul, style, and innovation. The band sounded the same and looked the same. Music fans grew bored and wanted a change. That is when, in 1991, Nirvana released Smells Like Teen Spirit. The band tapped into every dark feeling you'd have had as a youth at the time and found a way to share it and make it better through music. Nirvana took what they had learned from the previous decades, from their favorite bands, their mentors, and created music they love to play, while at the same time introducing a whole new audience of music to brand new styles. The band was the face of a generation. Their music, its voice. They defined an era. This is why Nirvana is important. Coming to the recent situation of rock and roll, many ponder, is rock music dead? Rock and roll will never die out, but the mass popularity days are over. The popular musical genres as of now are pop, rap, and to a lesser extent R&B. People born after 2000 mostly prefer rap and pop to rock now. But rock and roll will never die as long as bands like the Arctic Monkeys and Fall Out Boy live. Its essence will remain as long as we make an effort to listen to the golden works of the olden days.
All right. So, just to finish this talk off, I'm just going to be doing a little improv on a loop. And I decided to do something that would exemplify what rock is, right? So I took a riff called Hot Shape Box by Nirvana. I'm just gonna like play some lead over that using the most basic scale in rock, the pentatonic scale, just for like a minute or two. Thanks for tuning in, guys.